whether today or the 13th of June or, at any point in the future. If you're watching this webinar, my assumption is you're thinking of applying to business school and you're hoping to gain some insight into the journey of what it means to really apply to some of the world's most elite business programs. Today, we have with us a panel who's really gone through this journey. And I think for anyone watching, what they really need to pick up are few elements that would help their application stand out, in very, very competitive environments. We always tell everyone who works with us that the three elements that need to stand out in your business school application really needs to be clarity, authenticity, and purpose. And these three elements need to kind of interplay at different points of your application. Now, how to do that, how to ensure that you're really telling the story that is going to land well with an admissions team is the crux of today's discussion. We're going to break this conversation down into understanding the panelists' experiences at different points before starting the journey, as well as while they were developing material for these business schools. So I think having said that, I also want to just maybe set a few ground rules. If you have questions for us during the conversation, please add it to the Q&A box. We will keep getting to it while we're having our discussion. In the meanwhile, if you're attending right now and you want to tell us maybe a little bit about yourself, the schools that you have on your radar, the geographies you're considering, what stage of the process are you really in, you can feel free to add that to the chat box. It adds a lot of dimension to this conversation, and it's something that all of us panelists can keep in mind when we're giving answers, because it will really tell us, a little bit about the preparation you're going through right now and the kind of questions that you definitely have on your mind. We can maybe tailor parts of our discussion to answer those, elements as well. So tell us about yourself in the chat box and add questions to the Q&A box. Our general format is that we have our discussion and we'll keep looking at the Q&A box. We'll answer the bulk of questions at the end of the conversation, but if we feel that something is really relevant to what we're talking about, we will pick it up, during the discussion as well. So here, join me, Natasha. I head MBA applications at the Red Pen, and I think I really look forward to today's conversation. We've spent time with all our panelists. We know that there are brilliant stories to be told, and I hope to really discuss those in detail with them today. So what I'd love to do is now introduce individual panelists to you. So let's go ahead and start with you, Roshni. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we start our conversation?
Yes, thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you for having me on here today. So my name is Roshni Goyala. I finished my undergraduate studies from the University of Notre Dame, and since then have been working in the consumer goods space, first in data and analytics, and then moving into some more enterprise-wide transformation work. I'll be attending HBS this fall and apply to a few of the M7s during this application process. So looking forward to dive into talking about that a bit more. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Roshni, and congratulations. Let's move on. Ravi.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Ravi Chandra Taligadappa. You can call me Ravi because my name is quite long. But I did my undergrad at Stanford, studied economics, graduated 22, worked for a year and a half in consulting at McKinsey, and then moved back to India in early 2024. And I've been working in the politics and policy space ever since. And I'll be heading to Stanford Business School this fall. So lovely. Thank you for having me here. Lovely to be here and looking forward to talking to you guys.
Welcome, Ravi, and congratulations on your admit. Kriti.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kriti. I am headed to Wharton this year. I also got admits from a couple other M7 schools. Currently, I work at the Britspan Group. I work in social impact consulting, and I went to Shriram College of Commerce for undergrad, where I studied economics. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Kriti. Congratulations again. And Hitesh.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Hitesh. I graduated from BITS Pilani in 2022, where I joined American Express in the credit and fraud risk. And I had applied to 5 schools, Stanford, Booth, Kellogg, LBS, and Tepper. And like I'll be going to Kellogg, got an admit from LBS and Tepper as well. And yeah, looking forward to a conversation here.
Okay, so again, congratulations, Hitesh, as well, and welcome to the conversation. So, okay, I think, I really love the way each of you guys have introduced yourself, because I think one thing that really stands out is the diversity of experiences and qualifications that this panel has. And that's something that is going to really color today's discussion. So I think the first thing I want to do is really start us off strong at the very start of each individual journey. Now at the Red Pen, we typically realize that the decision to pursue an MBA is very personal. It might be rooted in professional reasons, but at the end of it, the guidance or the decision, the final decision to pull the trigger is deeply personal. And what I want to do is really get individual perspectives on your thought process, like when did you think, why did you think that this was the right time for in your career, in your professional life? Why was this the right time to pursue an MBA? And I'd really like to go around the table and understand your thought process. And maybe I'd like to start with you, Ravi, and we can go on from there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it was so my background, as I mentioned, is professionally in consulting and then in politics and policy. And it's not actually an easy, sort of natural transition from the politics policy world to business school. But I think when I was sort of making the decision to apply to grad school, I was talking to a lot of people who are in business school right now, or also in other schools, in policy schools and even law schools. And I think the biggest sort of takeaway I had, which is also something I kind of maybe learned from my time at McKinsey, is that business school is ultimately not about business. I think it's a misnomer in some ways. It's about management, right? That's really what they teach you. It's management and leadership. And that was a big attraction of business school for me, is that this is the only program that exists. MBAs are the only program that exists to sort of specifically build leadership and management skills in a way that no other sort of graduate school program promises, and which no other program even does, right? So I think for me, the reason why this felt like the natural sort of next step for me in my educational trajectory was because of the emphasis on leadership and management development that happens in business schools. So I think that was in terms of why business school for me. And in terms of why now, I think it's the timing was right again. Just in terms of it had been like 4.5 years since I graduated undergrad, so it kind of felt like the right time to go back to school because I'd experienced the world, learned what I like, learned what I like to do, learn what I want to be and who I want to be, and I can go back to school now with a clarity on sort of what I want from that experience, which I don't know if I would have had if I had gone straight from undergrad or in less time after my undergrad.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big part of the appeal for
And I
me.
think, yeah, and I think that's great, because I think the things which I would want maybe audience members to pick up is really that maturity of perspective that you gain before you think about an MBA. And I'm going to ask for everyone to remember that before we go on to the next person. So Roshni, why don't you give us your perspective?
Definitely. I think I really liked kind of what Ravi said a little bit about the management and leadership skills. And in my career, I spent about 3 years working in data product management at Skechers, and then a year in business integration and transformation. And very varied experiences in a way. One was very technical, and then one experience zoomed out a little bit to be a little bit more strategic in nature. And throughout both roles, I kept finding that the scale at which I wanted to create impact, and I wanted to lead at, and I wanted to manage different people, different teams, different products, that kept increasing at a pace that I didn't necessarily think I was going to be prepared for had I just continued. And so I felt like there were a few missing links. Business school wasn't going to solve all of them. There was some personal upskilling. There were some professional moves that I needed to make. But a lot of those gaps could be filled by business school, and then kind of allow me to get to scale myself up to the ultimate scale that I wanted to work at. And as far as timing, I think, to be a little repetitive again, it was just timing was right. I'm also about 4 years out of graduation, graduated in 2022. And so felt like I had finally got that sense of clarity. And yeah, just felt like this is the type that I can also act on in my particular career progression to then move on.
Yeah, and significantly what I'm picking up here is around that investment in yourself and deciding that this is the time that you need to look beyond like organic growth. So that's interesting as well. Hitesh, can you give us your reasoning as well? Because I just love how different everyone's careers are, but there are some patterns that are beginning to reveal itself at this stage as well.
Yeah, sure. So for me, like I've been working at an MNC for the past 4 years, and I realized you are only exposed to a limited perspective of an organization. I wanted to move beyond that. I wanted to move beyond the analytical space and learn about the other aspects of a business, be it a business model or corporate finance or leadership in general. And that's why I felt that having done my undergraduation from a technical university, having learned the analytical side of business, I wanted to now get into something where I have more perspective on. And that's why I felt an MBA would give me that particular skill set that would eventually lead to my post MBA goal.
And I think even from a maturity of experience, Hitesh, you also started thinking about it once you'd invested some time in building your career as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, true. So once you get to a stage where you see other people, how they are upskilling yourselves,
Yeah.
you also get that perspective, how you want to see yourself in, say, 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And that was one major reason for me to pursue an MBA. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, Kriti, you're also from such a different sphere. How do you think about why MBA and why now?
Yeah, no, I think I started off thinking about going for masters in the US, and but I wasn't sure if it's going to be an MBA or an MPP. I started speaking to some of my colleagues from Britspan US, who've gone to top business schools and policy schools in the US, and I think that made me realize, as Ravi also said, MBA is much more than just businesses. There is you get to design your own experience, and that made me super curious about MBA. And I think why now? One, I think also have like 5.5 years of experience at this point, and secondly, I'm also starting to see that the social impact space in India is changing super fast with AI and so many funding challenges, that we as consultants also feel that pressure to constantly upskill, to learn from other geographies, apply those learnings in India. So I think it was a combination of what I heard from some colleagues, some of the changes within the sector in India, and yeah.
No, I think that's extremely valuable because I also want to take that insight, Kriti, and just go back to you, Ravi, because especially in the sector that you're in, and we typically do have individuals not just from corporate sectors or very established corporate structures who work with us, but also we get inquiries from people who are from very unusual professional experiences as well. So, I'd love to understand from you how you see the value of an MBA, and if you can just give our audience a little context.
Yeah, for me, or was that for me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how I see the value of an MBA, I think
In your specific like sector, because
sector. Yeah.
it's definitely the structure and the thought process would be
Yeah.
slightly different from coming from corporate thought process as
Certainly.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's different, but also I think there's maybe a similarity in the end of it all, right? Because again, in some of the due diligence I've done, talking to people, alumni, students, etc. I think everyone has emphasized that what really holds up from business school in the long term is two things. One is the connections you make and the networks you build in your time at business school, and then the second is the sort of know-how of how to manage people and how to work with people well, right? Because I mean, especially it's always been the case, perhaps, and maybe AI is accelerating this trend even further. But really what distinguishes leaders from everyone else is their soft skills, right? Their ability to work with people, to get the best out of people, to resolve disputes, to mediate disputes, to give feedback, to take feedback, etc. And business school is really just the value for business school for all these people I talked to was very much that. And I think that lesson holds up very much for politics policy as well, right? In fact, perhaps even more acutely so because there's just less training and less sort of uh,
Yeah.
yeah, the culture is just a bit more rough around the edges in these spaces than in, in the corporate world. So I do think it actually distinguishes people even more when they have the knack to sort of to work well as a professional, because that's something
Yeah.
maybe we take for granted in the corporate sector. Uh, but it's like certainly very much, uh, that's something that's missing, right? In
Yeah.
these most unstructured spaces of politics, policy, etc.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe Kriti will have a similar opinion, maybe not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I feel like that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's needed. There's a clear use case for those kinds of skill sets and those kinds of
Yeah.
networks.
Yeah, and I was like interested to hear that perspective because I think you hit the nail on the head. It's also because, when you're in unstructured spaces as well, you start understanding the value of approaching those situations with a far more strategic viewpoint and perspective. And that's a great place for us to start. And now with that said, I really want to now talk about like the first obstacle that most MBA aspirants face, which is really about the standardized test and test prep. And we typically do find that, test prep is a marathon. It's not something that you do a month before, you actually plan to apply. And we've seen the timing of taking a test really impacting the stress, the anxiety, and sometimes even the ability to, take time to work on your application. So I really want to understand that, how did each of you approach test prep, maybe some strategic insights that you can offer the audience. And just if you had to tell your older self, maybe 1 year back, what they should have known about test prep. And again, I really want to go around the table and understand this. And this time, let's start with you, Hitesh.
Yeah, sure. So for me, at least, it was important that I maintain consistency in my preparation. It was important that I do not get distracted and just leave the syllabus as it is and then come back 1 month afterwards and then go again. So having that consistency was what was important to me. And there are many resources on the internet. It's important to know which resource to follow. For me, GMAT Ninja was one particular advisor who I followed a lot. And one important piece of advice that I would give myself at least was that um, like oftentimes during your test you'll come across questions where you have not narrowed down to two options, and it is very convenient to take another minute or two and get to the right answer. I would say just when you get to that position, just select one and move ahead. It will not just save you time but also the mental agony of getting an question correct. So that would be one advice that I'll give myself as well as to other applicants.
Yeah, that's so true. Kriti, I also want to speak to you now about test prep because you started working on your application super early. I think before most individuals had even decided which school they wanted to go to in the general this area. So I really want to understand test prep from your perspective, including the timing of taking a test.
Yeah, no, sure. I think I ended up taking my GMAT in October of 2024, which is almost like a year before I actually applied. And that was because I know if I'm doing applications and GMAT together, I will get super anxious about it. I think as for advice, I think one thing I would definitely tell myself is um, stick to OG for GMAT, because I think that's one resource we constantly underestimate. But the online question bank is amazing. I think I did most of my prep from there. Another thing that really worked for me was I would prepare late at night after I was done with work. I think that really helps like stimulate your brain a little bit, also like prepares you for like stressful situations that happen during the actual test. I think another thing I've seen work for people is decide between GRE and GMAT. I have a lot of friends who early on realized GRE is a is better suited to their skill set. And they did really well at GRE. I personally think I wouldn't have done super well at GRE, and GMAT was a better test for me. But I think it's really beneficial if you identify early and switch, because it will save you a lot of time and a lot of self-doubt. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think I was not super structured with my prep. I relied a lot on on mocks, and I did most of my prep once I had booked the slot. And yeah, I did most of my prep in like the 1 month leading up to the exam. But I think but I think that worked for me because I was able to prepare more under the pressure of the deadline. So yeah, that's all.
But you also had the time to
I did
then
have the
take
time.
and retake,
Yes.
and yeah, that's important. Roshni?
Yeah, I think the thing I would emphasize the most is timing, both in terms of prior to your actual application cycle, as
Mm,
well as in terms of when you feel ready. I think a mistake I kind of fell into, or a trap I fell into, was let me just push it off a little bit more. Unlike Kriti, I hadn't booked my slot yet, so I kept preparing, and I thought, I'll book my slot when I'm ready, and I kept pushing that off, and thinking, oh, I'll do it in one shot and it'll be good. But the beauty is that you do have the option to retake, and I think in most scenarios that's not necessarily really a negative, or it's not going to count against you. So you might as well utilize what you have at your availability. So I think if I was to look back, I would have kind of taken my first attempt a lot quicker than I did, and it would have allowed me a lot more time to hone in on certain, topics or concepts that I perhaps was getting stuck on, improve
yeah.
on them for the next go around, and then be a lot more comfortable during my actual application process, having that, big test out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important piece. And I think from three of you so far, what I'm hearing is also like the timing and the strategy that you use in terms of which test you take, as well as the timing of how you can reduce anxiety is really important. Because I think the one thing people struggle with is really juggling between work and test and, major deadlines that are coming their way, and just real life. So, that's an interesting perspective. Ravi, did you
Yeah,
take the GMAT or the GRE?
I took the GRE, because I applied to both policy schools and MBA, and I'm
Yes.
actually going to do a dual degree. I'm doing both the MBA and the Masters in International Policy at Stanford.
Okay.
Yeah, I did the GRE, and I actually did a mistake you talked about of not giving myself enough time to prep, or to even to do a retest if I had to, right? Because I gave my exam in November and I applied to my first college in December. So it was all or nothing, and it was maybe too high stakes, and I wish I had not done that, but that's
Mm,
what I ended up doing. So my advice is, don't be like me. Like, plan ahead, do it earlier. And the GRE is great because I think the GMAT too. You can kind of just book a session whenever you want, and you can take it from wherever you want. And it's not like the SAT, for instance, right? So that really gives you a lot of flexibility, and I think you should use that by planning ahead instead of being smart about how you time things, right? Give
yeah.
yourself a chance to take another attempt if you need to, and give yourself a chance to prepare for the first attempt itself.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual test prep, I think, I think a lot of it is timing, right? Like the math or the English is not that hard necessarily, especially the math, right? The timing is really what the concern is. So I think Hidesh's advice was great. Like, don't try to get everything right. Like, that's maybe the default mode in which most of us operate, right? But
Yeah.
this is a game of timing the test, not necessarily getting it right. So that's I think my key advice is, like, get a lot of test prep down the way, because what my suspicion is that most of us will not necessarily need help on content. Most of us will need help on sort of test taking strategy, right?
Yes.
So just optimize for that when you're preparing.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece to remember. It's about getting your test taking strategy right. And sometimes, we find that when individuals take like the second attempt or the third attempt, for example, your test the scores do improve. It's not just because you have conceptual clarity, but it's also because you start refining the way in which you're approaching the test. So,
Yeah.
I think that's something I see a lot of head nods for. So great to see that that is what's on everyone's mind. Now I just want to move from, test prep to really talk about school selection, because I think once you have a test score, it puts a lot of things in perspective for all of us, and then you kind of think, okay, what is my reach? What is my stretch? What is my safety? And those are important discussions to have. Now, we are talking to all of you, and all of you have admits to really elite programs, but a lot of times what we talk about is yes, understand rankings, understand why schools are on those, those scales, but beyond the allure of that, also emphasize fit. Like try and understand which school is going to really give you the resources to get to where you want to be. And can you just give me an example, like each of you, just maybe give me an example of how you moved on to like research and what really consolidated for you, what really helped you arrive at the decision that these are the schools I want to apply to. Like this is where I'm looking at fit. It would be helpful to understand your insight when you really landed on that decision. And also the round, because some of you applied and got through in round one, some of you applied and got through in round two. So it would be helpful to understand how you factored in the round-wise decision making as well. So, and over here, maybe I'll start with you, Kriti.
Yes, I'll start off with the round selection. I think I ended up applying to most of my schools in round one. I had a great experience in round one, I think, because I think maybe because I started early, so it wasn't as stressful and I was ready for round one. Yeah, I think, but the only downside with round one is most schools release their applications in July. So you have a couple of months. And I think especially for Wharton, they were specifically late this year. And we only got to know of essay prompts in mid-July. Uh, but thankfully, they shortened their essays. But I think that's the only downside of round one. But I think if you're ready, just apply in round one, because I think it's also great to be done with the process by December, and then you can start thinking about other aspects from
Yeah.
January on. But I don't think there's any downside to applying in round two also. As for research, I think it was a mix. I think I started off with I think just a lot of secondary research on all the schools that were on my radar. And then I shortlisted a little bit based on where I was finding things that were very interesting to me and also Natasha's advice. And then I think what really helped was speaking to people. So I ended up reaching out to the people at my firm who've been to those schools, or college seniors who've been to those schools, or cold outreach on LinkedIn. And also, I think certain schools have like specific resources. So Wharton has the admissions fellows that you can write to, speak to. And I think it's speaking to people that really helped spark that interest in specific schools. Because I think I remember when I was speaking to a few Wharton admissions fellows, I realized like they'd come from very similar background as me, from consulting or from social impact, and I felt like uh, they're just wonderful to talk to, and the school will give me the resources that I want. So I would say I think start with secondary research, but I think it's really talking to people that will help you get interested in the program and also give you specific insights related to your profile.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll come back to that research piece in a little while. So, Roshni, can you then let me know your thought process?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both. The timelines come in play a little bit based on your research as well. And I think something that I had to really work through was breaking down any preconceived notions or perceptions that I had about particular programs. Most of my exposure to these schools that I was looking at were primarily during my undergrad research, and of course, undergrad and MBA specifically are very different. So kind of breaking out of that mindset of saying, this school is good for this school is good for this, and I'm just going to stick with that, and hence narrow in my searches. Really breaking that down and giving different schools a fair shot almost in my mind. And the way I did that was by attending almost every online or in-person event that I could. It happened to be virtual more often than not. But literally just sitting on the admissions website and then going through every event and just signing up ad nauseum almost. And what that helped me, even though sometimes it could be repetitive, what that really helped me with was exposure to not only just adcoms talking about the schools, but also various students, first years, second years, talking about not only their experience at that school, but how they had kind of formed their opinions and their thoughts about the school and how they applied that to their application process. So I come from it's not really a non-traditional background. It's fairly I did economics undergrad as well, which I think we all have done now. But and then working in data, and then in the consumer goods space overall. So there were plenty of people who had come from that background. But what was really interesting was how they had formed their narrative or built their stories, and how that then played out at the particular school they were at. So trying
Yeah.
to marry all of those different elements was really helpful in kind of narrowing down the list that I wanted to go to. And ultimately, what I said at the beginning, my round as well, I realized that there were some things I could speak to about in a particular application in round one, and I needed some more time to build out a particular narrative for round two. And
Yeah.
so that's how I kind of made my decisions.
And I do realize that, even in discussions, we accordingly decided which schools we would want that narrative to build for, so that
Mhm.
it lent more weight to the kind of, the passion that you wanted to demonstrate for those schools. So we kind of structured it out between round one and round two, just to ensure that you were telling the best story in both rounds. So I think
Yes,
that's important to remember. So,
definitely.
yeah, Hitesh.
Yeah, so I would say I applied in round one, and that's what I would also advise my fellow applicants,
Yeah,
because once you have round one out of the way, you gain maturity, you know how to structure your round two strategy. And that's something that helped me as well. Like I had schools admits in round one, which eased the pressure on me in round two.
yeah, yeah.
And on school selection, yes, rankings can be a good starting point. For me, what I did was to see how many of my undergrad seniors had taken that transition or taken that jump
Mm,
from bids to that target school, because that helped me realize how people with similar backgrounds are faring in the target
yeah,
school. So
yeah.
that's how I positioned my research on. I talked to as many people as possible. I got a good vibe from every school, but ultimately Kellogg was the one which I felt gave the most opportunities and fed the best among all the schools I had.
Yeah. And I remember us saying that, it's really speaking to you. A lot of the offerings, a lot of the resources, it just appealed a lot to the interest that you had professionally as well, the way you thought. So I remember that, there was a lot of alignment in your research and how it kind of shaped that thought process, which I'm going to come back to.
Yeah.
So, Ravi, what was your thought process?
Yeah,
Round
I
one
uh,
and round two.
I was round two, and very late to it as well, maybe. And so I completely endorse Sudesh's suggestion that you should do round one if possible, not because it has a better chance of admission, but because uh, I just think of my own trajectory in applications, and I applied basically all between December 1st and January 8th or something. And even in that 38-day span, I can tell a difference in the quality and maturity of my application for a December 1 application and a Jan 8th application, right? And a Jan 8th application was a GSB one, which worked out. So clearly some improvement happened over time. Uh, so I think, yeah, I think it just sort of helps to you know, uh, have more time with your application, with your narratives, which you're sort of writing to get maturity. So even though I applied round two, I would say apply round one, guys. Like it just helps you, right? Sort of figure yourself out and figure out what's working and what's not. So yeah, that's my advice in terms of rounds. In terms of colleges, for me, I think it was partly driven by which program had a good MBA as well as a good policy program, because I was interested in a dual degree, right? So
Yeah,
uh, yeah, I think that just like really filtered it out. So I ended up applying only to 4 universities
yeah,
uh, in terms of which sort of fit both criteria of having good policy programs and good business schools, right? So, for
yeah,
instance, Wharton is a very good business school, but it doesn't have a great policy program. It doesn't have a policy program at all, if I'm not wrong. So, it didn't sort of it didn't appeal to me, right? Whereas
yeah.
HBS did, for instance. So, uh, yeah. So for me, it was a lot driven by the combination of the two
And I'm
program
also going to
offerings that they
just
had.
touch on a little bit of the conversations that you and I have had, because I think all
Yeah.
the schools were relevant, but they all had different dimensions to the way it would connect you to, the goals that you had, right? Like whether it was a traditional kind of network that you were building, whether you wanted to look at a really, tech-enabled kind of environment. I think a lot of those elements applying to a variety of schools which fit different elements also meant that you could weigh your options very differently, once there are admits rolling in. So I think that also helps, in all of the conversations that all four of you have had. It's also about understanding how different schools connect you to your goals in different ways, and then taking an informed decision later. And I had a question on research, but I think all of you have answered it in your own way. But I think one of the things that I'd like to sum up based on this part of the discussion is really about the power of conversation and coffee chats, whether we talk to people who are successful admits, and we also do a lot of conversations with people who are at the end of year one or, at the end of their program. We keep uploading those on our YouTube channel. But I think the one thing that is common, and I'm glad to see it play out today as well, is the power of just connecting with someone and being proactive. Because, like Kriti said, you start seeing so many common threads, and those are individuals who become your cheerleaders and your well-wishers. And the way Hitesh also mentioned that when you start talking to people who have similar backgrounds or pre-MBA backgrounds, or they've kind of gone to the schools that they want to, you start seeing how you can connect the dots for your future. Those are individuals who can also give you the benefit of on-ground perspective. I think the most important value addition is to speak to someone who is on campus right now and can talk to you about what recruitment looks like, or what the school is kind of doing at this moment that is enriching them, which is a huge value addition. I think anyone who is applying to business school needs to realize that it's not about secondary research, which is, it's not about the website, it's not about published material, but it's about using those thought starters to then build on some really valuable conversations. And the more conversations you have, the more organic your pitch is. It just sounds natural. So, I think that is really a beautiful way to put it. And Hitesh, I just wanted to understand because, you are from a pool, an applicant pool, which tends to be, slightly overrepresented, right? And you do see that even when you're looking at people who applied with you and perhaps maybe did or did not become successful. So I just want to understand, given how competitive that particular subsection is, how do you think your pitch really differentiated you?
Yeah, it was one of my biggest worries coming into the application process. And yeah, Natasha did a very good job to lessen my misery there. And yeah, I had a decent GMAT score. I thought I needed a super high GMAT score. But now I feel the most important part is to have a well-rounded application. You need to be sure that you are presenting your best self to the admissions committee. And for me, that was uh, articulating my work with underserved communities and underprivileged children. I have been teaching and mentoring students for the past 3 years, and also having a hobby on the side. Like I play drums a lot, so I made sure that I was presenting a more well-rounded personality, not just being good in academics or being good in just one field. So that's how I would say I differentiated myself. And of course, it's also very important that you articulate these stories, have a bridge between your different aspects of your profile. And I felt like Natasha did a brilliant job in guiding me on how to position those stories.
I think that reflection is really important. And, I will not shy back from saying that you need to think of yourself as more than a statistic. You do need to think of yourself as everything that makes you the person that you are. And sometimes that's not necessarily a linear narrative, but it will make sense to what's important to you and what you really see value in. So, yeah, I'm always going to say that. So, thanks for bringing that up, Hitesh. Okay. Reapplication. Now, there is a lot of, there's a lot of very varying opinions that you will get every time you talk about, being a reapplicant and what it means. Does it improve my chances? Does it reduce my chances? And there's just so much uncertainty around it. And, that's something that I'd like to touch on briefly because, Roshni, you took a decision this year where you applied to new programs and you reapplied to some programs that you had applied to earlier. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your strategy and just your thought process when thinking about whether to reapply or not?
Yeah, I think this ties back really nicely into what we started out with, which is thinking about this MBA as an investment in yourself, and being really sure about what you want out of it, and being at that maturity level, not only in terms of work experience, but also in terms of clarity of what you want from the 2 years in an MBA, post MBA immediately, and then in the long term as well. So something that I had to, I think, focus on or really take stock of was what my professional journey had been so far. Reflect on certain decisions that I had made regarding my undergrad, regarding this professional course career that I had taken, and why I saw that fit into not only a particular MBA program, but the MBA programs, but an MBA program overall. So taking stock of and being really reflective, I think, to emphasize again what you were saying, Natasha, just being really reflective in maybe why some of my applications hadn't been successful in the last year. Of course, there's some data points that I cannot change. And you can always look back and say, I could have done better on a particular college course for my GPA, or I could have given that standardized test one more time. But during my second time around, those weren't things that I could change, right? So I had to really focus on what I could change, and what I could change was a clarity of my goals and my narrative building of how I had got to this point so far. So really honing in on those two things, I think were imperative in terms of my reapplication process. And why I chose the school selection that I did, I think goes back to a little bit about what I said, was breaking down that preconceived notions or perceptions of certain places, and just really going a lot deeper in research than I had previously. I think a lot of the cliches hold true. Talk to as many people as you can, actually go deep into that research. And oftentimes that's a direct reflection of, I think, the success you see with a particular program or not, application program or not.
And reflection is really what makes a difference in terms of articulating why you still think the program is important to you. And, in light of whatever professional developments have happened since your last application. So I think that's also something to remember. With that, I just want to segue into essay development, because I think for all of everyone on this panel, we've had discussions around what works, what doesn't work. And at every point, we always emphasize authenticity. It's what admissions committees look for, but it's such a misunderstood word. And I think throughout that journey of writing essays, whether it was a strictly professional why MBA, why the school, or talking about some very personal elements of your journey and decision-making process, I think that has been something that we've just journeyed together, So I just want to now talk about the way each of you built your individual thought process around essay development. And, Roshni, I'm going to start with you again. But it's just about expressing yourself authentically is a process, right? An essay doesn't come together in a single draft or one or two drafts. It takes time. And, for all of us, we've experienced times when we reach a plateau and we've broken through. We've thought about this is not working, and we've just started on what does work. But can you just give us your strategy? Like, what do you think really worked as we were working on essays?
Definitely. I think the first thing that really helped me was the GTKY document that the rep and makes you do right at the start, or assigns you right at the start of your application process, right? I think a lot of times people want to jump right into just essay writing. You see a prompt, all the prompts are released, and you want to just start, and you think all the resources about the school, so you can talk about why MBA, why a particular school, and you can just start writing. I think that's the first mistake that a lot of people can make, and I was able to avoid that due to the GTKY document. So having to go through this getting to know you document, which really probes on what are strengths you think you have, what are weaknesses you think you have. Can you talk about a particular story where you displayed leadership, where you displayed growth, without it being in the context of an essay, but rather talking about an experience you've had and being able to reflect and draw these experiences out. I think you ask for 3 or 4 different stories under each category, and usually you kind of bottom out after 1 or 2 stories. And you helped me really, but by asking me to bring out that 3rd and 4th perspective under a particular category, I was really able to take stock of again, my life, and how I could draw these different threads from different aspects of my life out. And so once I had that document, I was then able to, again, you have it all in writing. You've gone through and spoken about it with someone. I think another mistake is when I was writing, a lot of times I thought everything I'm writing makes sense. And I think a lot of times you came back with either it's not necessarily that it's not making sense, but I don't think you're being able to communicate what you want because you haven't really thought this through from a particular perspective. So gaining those external perspectives, being asked questions about why I wrote a particular sentence, even not just a paragraph, not just an essay, were really helpful throughout the process. Yeah, happy
Yeah.
to talk more, but I'll let
Yeah.
some others add in as well.
Ravi, I can see you smiling. I know we went back and forth over message also so many times. So do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy reflection and reflective writing. So in a way, perhaps I maybe enjoyed this process more than other people would have. So it was playing to my strengths as opposed to my weaknesses. I think my advice was for me, what I found most helpful, and this is true for both undergrad and postgrad applications, is to have sort of two sets of people review your essays alongside you. One is people who know you very well, right? And this could be family, colleagues, teachers, friends, whoever it is, but somebody who can sort of read and tell you whether you're being honest about yourself and who you are, and whether you're sort of showing the full depth of vulnerability that you ideally want to in an application. And the second is somebody who is just a good writer or a good sort of, uh, you know, sort of a more professional, somebody who can just sort of speak to what effect your writing is having on them, right? For me, that was Natasha. For you, it might be whoever, right? So, but Natasha's great, so I would recommend. So yeah, for instance, I think just to give examples of both, I think one is, I had this essay that I worked on for a long time, and then maybe like 2 days before the application, my friend finally saw it. He had sat on it for weeks. He finally saw it, and he was like, "This is terrible. This is not about you at all. Like if I saw this paper, this essay, I would not attribute it to you. I'd attribute it to somebody else." And he made me rewrite it from scratch. And I don't think the essay that came out was so much more vulnerable and personal than the essay I had initially written. Right. So having that sort of, emotional connect with the person who's reviewing it and who's sort of holding you accountable really helps. And to the second point about somebody who's professional and can give you feedback on how your essay is reading. I remember my essay actually to GSB began with the words, "I am not sure where this came from," or something to that effect. And Natasha was like, "Cut this out. You need to radiate conviction." And she was right. I had to radiate conviction. You don't get into business school by sort of beginning with the sentence, "I'm not sure," right? So you also need that kind of professional eyes to sort of make sure that your writing is reading as it should to somebody, a third party. So that's my advice to you. So have two sets of advisors.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And know what to ask them. I would add that piece to
Yeah.
it. Like know what to ask them because otherwise, you can get very, very stressed out. But I think what you mentioned is correct. Like someone who knows you will be able to point out strengths and vulnerabilities at a very personal level. So I think that's true. Hitesh, I think yours was an interesting exercise because we did so much deep reflection for so many different parts of your essays. But for you, what was the breakthrough?
Yeah, like one advice that you gave me was the stories could be similar, but the interpretation would be different and unique to each applicant. And that's what I also did. Like the GTKY form was a game changer for me as well. I uh, tried to introspect as much as I can all my life stories and just write in my words what I took out from that particular story. And that's what helped me during the application as well as I was able to form a cohesive narrative across all instances. And that's what I also wanted to get through in my application and later during my interviews. So yeah, that's what I would also advise applicants is to just write whatever they feel like some life story, just start with something and eventually it will come through. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to realize that there is no set formula. Like Hitesh said, sometimes what you want to say, you will perhaps get common advice. That's not what you write. But I think go with what your heart tells you is important to the story and then seek the advice that, like Roshni and Ravi also spoke about. I think then you'll get much more meaningful advice as to whether it's true to you or not. And with that, I'm going to come to you, Kriti. Can you share your insight as well?
Yeah, I think essays are a very unique opportunity of articulating why you are the person you are. And I think all of us come from very different backgrounds, have had access to different kinds of resources when we were growing up, had very different experiences. And I think what it helped me, and I think essays were also very helpful in helping me dig deeper and understand what makes me me, what experiences have shaped my career decisions. And I think being vulnerable in your essays about those experiences is also like one, I think it's helpful, and second, it feels very fulfilling when you write those essays. And I think another thing that helped me was sometimes you forget some of your stories. And I think for a couple of my essays, I ended up like brainstorming with my manager for my professional
Yeah.
stories, who was
Yeah.
able to recall the things I had forgotten about, like specific cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just treat it as a journey of like just learning about yourself and what motivates you, and
Mm.
and uh, taking support from other people to also brainstorm with stories.
Yeah. And I think the main thing is that structured reflection really helps because a lot of us forget parts or times of our life when we've been vulnerable or when we've gone through something good or bad. We tend to remember the good, but we tend to not remember learning moments that were not so great for us. So it's important to apply structure right at the start of like brainstorming and not going with what you remember in the greatest detail at the outset. So yeah, the GTK really brings all of that together. So you know. Okay, I'm very conscious that we have like about 7 minutes to really close out our conversation. I will tell people that I do want to get to questions because we're seeing questions come in. So keep adding it to the Q&A box. If something in this conversation has struck a chord, I'm going to get to it in the next 5 minutes. Now, I want to first now talk about interviews because this year we've seen a lot of variation in the way schools are evaluating individuals, not just in the form of like live essays, live conversation, but also in the form of video essays or video interactions before there's even shortlisting for an interview. Now, I want to touch on interview prep in two ways because I know that some of you have gone through a format where video interactions, recorded interactions were also part of the process. And, interview prep in itself was such a strategic task, So I really want to touch on certain very specific elements that each of you has gone through. So for example, Kriti, you participated in, Wharton's team-based discussion, which is such a unique format, and a lot of people get overwhelmed with a format like that. So, can you share like a top tip of yours for interview preparation for this kind of interaction?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of advice floating on TBD online that you see, and I think a lot of people just emphasize, play the role of the person who's summarizing, who's giving structure to the discussion. But I think what TBD is trying to test is how you interact with a group, and in group interactions, there's different roles people have to play. So be natural. I think also reflect on like if you're
I
working in a
think,
team.
Kriti, we've lost your sound for some reason. I can come back to it.
Yes.
Oh, I can get you now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I think just reflect on how you work with the team. You don't necessarily have to be the one giving structure if that's not coming naturally to you. I didn't, and I think it works out for people. So yeah, just don't get overwhelmed with all the advice you get.
And practice, practice, practice. I
Yes,
think,
practice. Yeah.
a lot of people do not realize the importance of having experienced partners during that time. And one of the most worthwhile engagements or worthwhile investments you can make is working with observers who can give you a lot of feedback on how you interact in group situations. And you're right, Kriti, like a lot of people will tell you things like play this role, play that role. Yes, that's true. But getting comfortable with your natural style is something that you need feedback on to find it. You need to find that natural style. So I think for the TBD, that is another piece that I would also, say is really, really important. I'm now going to come to Roshni and Ravi because both of you went through such unique formats. Like the HBS interview is so distinctive, and Ravi, even with GSB, I think the kind of pairing you had, with an interviewer and the kind of depth of questioning, it really makes a difference. So I'd like to understand your experience with those in-person interviews, and maybe I'll start with you, Roshni.
So the HBS interview wasn't anything is very different than I think most other interviews. It's a very concise 30-minute slot. You're aware that the interviewer knows about you. It's not blind like a few of the other interview processes are. And I had, again, similar to during for the TVD, like seen a lot of information online about or just heard from other people. You have to be prepared about to talk at length about perhaps your industry or go about how AI was impacting your industry, or a variety of topics that weren't necessarily something you'd covered in your application, but still somehow find a way to tie it back into your application and your strengths and why you were the right fit. So for me, what helped the most was getting in as many marks as I could. I had a pretty short period of time to prepare for my HBS interview. So just getting in as many marks as I could to see how I was presenting within this HBS structure or the interview structure, see how
Yeah.
I was able to answer questions that I was able to prepare for, as well as those that I wasn't, and just really hone in on what I wanted to make sure I conveyed during the interview. I think one thing you learn throughout this process is there are a lot of things that you just have to leave off. You have to pass through what's important and what's not, even
Yes.
though you might want to express everything to the interviewer. So really learning the art of conciseness and ensuring that I was able to get at least these 3 particular things I wanted out during the interview.
Yeah. Yeah. So true, right? When you have 1 minute, what is the one thing you're going to prioritize saying? I think that is the answer to give. Okay, Ravi, what about you?
Yeah, I think the Stanford GSB interview is a bit more sort of personally focused, a lot more focused on your journey, and really just they really do sort of really go into details and to press you for more explanation than maybe you are used to providing. So it's quite like intensive and invasive in that sense. Uh, I think really the preparation is a lot of it is just being true and authentic, right? And sort of that being true and authentic in your application and then also in your interview, right? Because the interviewer does not have access to your application, but they have access to your resume, right? And if they are saying the same things about you that you are saying in your application, right? I think that sort of goes a long way in sort
Yeah.
of making the case for who you are. So authenticity is really important in the interview and in the application. Is I think the first takeaway I have. Uh, the second takeaway I have is that you have to practice not necessarily sort of to stalk why MBA, why Stanford answers, because that's not what was asked. You have to practice more sort of just remembering your own story, right? Remembering details which you maybe have left out in your retelling of these stories. Because those details are the ones which sort of let your skills shine, right? They're testing sort of who you are as a professional, right? So how exactly did you take feedback in this one particular instance, right? Or how exactly did you circumvent an obstacle in your course in this other instance that you talked about? That's the kind of detail they're looking for. So just knowing your story very well and sort of just keeping that in mind, I think is really, really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Hitesh, in your case, you applied to schools where, the video component was a big part of the evaluation process before you even, got to the interview stage. And you had to literally prepare for video interviews. And then in a short period of time, you had to prepare for live interactions. And a lot of these video interviews were based on so many behavioral, dimensions where you had very little time to think and you had to like speak on the spot practically. So can you just give me a sense? Because, I know that staying calm, thinking on the spot, these are not skills that come naturally to us, for anyone, like it requires time. So can you share your perspective on just tackling this kind of scenario?
Yeah, what helped me was having those set of stories already prepared and practicing as much as I can. I usually called up my friends and had a mock interview with them. I also took the TRP mock interview session, and which greatly helped me in my preparation. And it's all about getting comfortable in front of a camera, and that's what you really are trying to do, because in most cases you'll have a virtual interview with a person, or it would be a video interview. So for me, it was getting comfortable and then just articulating the stories. And one thing that I proactively did was to just minimize the screen, like have a small screen so that and have the normal background with which I am familiar with. That helped me calm my nerves because there was a sense of familiarity. And yeah, just practicing as much as I can, because eventually all the MBA questions are coming from a set of question banks, and I made sure that I had certain stories for certain questions, and that helped me
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the important things that you touched on is just that third dimension of anxiety, which is how do I look in front of a camera and how do I present myself? Am I speaking too fast, too slow? Am I saying something that can be understood by the person in front of me? So I think the best thing that I would also emphasize, and Hitesh, this was something that you had done so well, is just the amount of practice in front of a camera so that you're not thrown by seeing your own image
Yes.
on the screen. So I think that really helps to remove that element of anxiety. Okay, now with that, I'm going to come to the final question, that I'd like to ask all of you to answer, maybe in just like a sentence, okay? But if you have to, there's so many people, we're seeing questions come in, and please add to it because I'm taking questions now after this. What is the biggest misconception that potential applicants have during the MBA application process that you want to address today? And maybe here I'm going to start with maybe Kriti. What is the biggest misconception people have and you want to address?
I think one big misconception is like XYZ school prefers profiles that look like some archetype for like some like X school doesn't take consultants, for example. And I think there's a lot of that like floating around. And maybe like that may be true because like let's say maybe too many consultants are applying to that school and hence they're selective, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a shot. So I think just don't sell yourself too short, just apply anyway. And I think more often than not, people who's saying all this don't know what they're talking about. So I think relying on, like, for example, I relied on you, Natasha, to give to bust some of these myths for me. So that would be it for me.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that works, right? It gives you a lot of confidence when someone gives you an alternative perspective as well. Roshni?
I think that one element can make or break your application. I don't think that's true. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to perfect one particular element, thinking that that's what's going to be their breakthrough. And
Yeah.
don't think that's the case.
Yes, very true. Very true. It's a holistic application. Every piece of information matters. So, Hitesh.
Yeah, like what Roshni said, and I certainly had this misconception that like these top schools only take certain elites, like an elite athlete or a prodigy. And
Mhm.
yeah, although that may be true, but they only constitute a minority of the entire of their class. So the majority come from backgrounds who are traditionals and they have a well-rounded personality. So I would say just give your best shot, don't sell yourself short, and
Yes.
like you will be surprised with what you get.
Yeah. I think take your best shot and put the effort into building a very reflective application. I think the main thing that I will say is never think of yourself as having a shot or not having a shot, because until you actually go into the process, it's very difficult for anyone to tell you that you can get in or you can't get it. So go in with that confidence. Ravi.
Yeah, I think maybe uh, I don't notice a misconception, but it's something that I definitely believe a bit more back in the day. But I don't think that business schools are looking for one archetype of uh, are looking for students only from corporate backgrounds or a certain sort of professional qualification before they apply. Like you could be doing anything, and as long as you're making a convincing case as to why you are a good professional and why you can sort of benefit from business school degree, I think you stand a very good chance, right? So even if you're an artist, if you're in politics, if you're in I don't know, acting, whatever it is, as long as you're able to make a case for why you can demonstrate these not business skills, but these like sort of professional skills and why you can sort of benefit from business school, I think you have a very good chance. So don't let your background sort of hold you back from applying to business school. Uh, as long as you make the case for it, they will listen. So it's on you to
Yeah.
figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so true. So I think I'm going to just sum up a lot of this conversation. A big part of what we've discussed is how to just develop clarity, how to develop perspective, and how to really work on authenticity because you will get so many perspectives. I think it's important to drown out the noise and really focus on what adds value to the way you think about yourself and your ambition and how it helps you evaluate the pitch that you're building for business school. So I just want to address like a couple of questions that we've got, and I may, just ask you guys to help me out. But I have someone who said that, does doing a full-time job during your undergraduate at an MNC support the MBA application in any way, or is work experience only considered after undergrad? Now, I know that a lot of you guys have internship experience, so I may just touch on that, but I will maybe structure an answer to this first. I think doing a full-time job during your undergrad is immensely valuable because you're building perspective and you should be able to add that to the kind of person and ambition that you have. So it's important from a storytelling perspective because you will be able to add a lot more value to how you present yourself. However, is work experience only considered after undergrad? Yes, in terms of the absolute years of work experience that they will look at, they will consider the work experience you have after you have completed your undergraduate degree. But I think, and I do see a lot of you guys nodding your heads as well. I think there's immense value in talking about internships and how they've added, value to who you are. So please keep that in mind. There's another person who has asked about, give me a second. Um, Completing 8 years of work experience. And while I don't feel it's late for an MBA, I do recognize that I'm above the average experience level for many full-time MBA programs. How would admissions committees view someone like me? Which M7 applicant posts would I be most competitive in? And how should I think about positioning my experience relative to younger candidates? I think one of the most important things that you need to think about is reflecting on why you need an MBA at this point in time. Because if you are someone who's an outlier, either with less years of work ex or sometimes more than average, the average class profile, the years of work experience, I think you need to really reflect on how you want to present why a full-time MBA program is still very, very relevant to you. Because that is the first question that is going to be on the minds of anyone who is evaluating your degree. We have seen individuals make it to M7 programs with higher than average work experience. But the one thing that has set those applicants apart is a very, very strong pitch for why an MBA is relevant. Because once you cross a certain threshold of experience and you carry with you a certain amount of leadership exposure, and you carry with you that a slightly more mature perspective, a full-time MBA may not necessarily be where you get the fullest value. Then you may want to consider an executive MBA. You may want to consider other opportunities where you'll interact with a peer group who has more experience. So if you still think it's relevant, you need to be able to articulate why. And you can reach out. I'd be happy to talk about that. Okay. I do have a few more. How do AOs evaluate an online undergrad degree and then a third year offline with LSE accreditation? This is something that you should be reaching out to schools for. Another thing, and this is something that all our panelists have also done, is sometimes you will have queries about very concrete parts of who you are and your application. And your best bet is to reach out to schools early and just get clarity on whether they do or do not accept either accreditation or if they want further information. The worst thing you can do is ask about or worry about these elements very close to deadlines, because if schools come back to you and then tell you that they need an additional piece of documentation or they need some certificate, you will find yourself scrambling with either during holiday time, which is probably the worst experience for anxiety, or you may not get people responding to you with the kind of detail that you require. So sometimes these interactions require one or two discussions or, reconfirmations. So please, if you have a question like this, reach out to the target school that you have now rather than in September. If we initiate something outside of our domain to the overall business, does it look like we're confused about our career? For example, if someone is on treasury of a digital bank and then starts and starting a strategy department with the CEO, does it sound confusing? I think these things cannot really be evaluated in isolation. What you need to think about is if you have started an initiative outside of your primary role, how does it build your perspective? If not on your future, maybe on certain elements that you were curious about. It's fine to have an additional initiative because if you're following your curiosity and managing two very demanding responsibilities, it's a great story, but it needs to add to an insight or a perspective that is relevant. So sometimes those things aren't very obvious when you're doing it, but after you finish the initiative, you might really understand that you've got a lot of understanding, life experience or reflection about yourself and your capabilities. And that can very well be part of your MBA narrative. So those are the questions we have. I think there were a couple of questions around, should you do an MIM or an MBA? I think those are questions that we can have a discussion with you on your profile, so you can reach out to us. We'll be very happy to, walk you through how you need to think about your future. Yes, an MBA does give you a lot of value addition. I think you need to evaluate an MBA's value, not just in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, but over a 20-year period and where you see yourself progressing. So if you have questions, I'm just going to tell you that reach out to us, book an appointment with us. It's available on our website. You can just go to the redpenmba.com and book a conversation with me or someone from our team, and we'll be happy to answer that. So I'd really like to thank every one of you for answering this. Yes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And is work experience necessary? Yes, most of the time work experience will be necessary because you need to have a strong story and really pushing yourself at work and having um, real world experience is going to add tremendous value to anything that you tell the school because it will show that you have a proven ability to process the real world and to take important life lessons. So, can you reach out to any of us, you on LinkedIn? Yes, I think all of our panelists are available on LinkedIn. And should you want to ask some questions around MBA applications, you can just connect with them. They're all available on LinkedIn. They're very present and they'll be happy to answer questions. If you have broader questions, please reach out to us at the Red Pen on our website, and we'll be happy to take that conversation forward. So with that, I'd like to really thank everyone for their time. If I've not gotten to your question, I'm sorry, but just reach out to me and I'd be happy to continue that conversation. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us, and I wish you all the best in your futures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So congratulations to all of you on your great admits, and just have a great 2 years from this point forward. So see you then.